I don't need to tell you that women in fiction are often flattened. There doesn't need to be some long-winded meditation on the history of the hysteria diagnosis to get that through to you. You know, I know. So instead, I'm just here to offer some nuanced and complex depictions of women in literature who are creepy and strange and unsettling and gross. The first book I have to offer you is Brutes by Tate. It's this kind of weird coming-of-age horror story about a group of 13-year-old girls, which is the most horrifying age, and they are obsessed with this girl in their town who ends up going missing. They basically worship this girl, and they're 13 years old, so they're trying to figure themselves out, and it takes you through all the ways that they emulate her and all the uncomfortable shame that comes along with trying to fit in and not knowing who you are. I love first person plural, and this book is a perfect example of how to do it well. It flicks back and forth between the group speaking from a we voice as 13-year-olds to then chapters in the future that are just each individual girl as young women. And it kind of pulls them apart from the group and individualizes them in a way that you don't get to see when they're speaking from the first person plural perspective. And you also get to see how the summer of when they were 13 has molded them as young women. It's very atmospheric. You can feel the sticky, sweaty haziness of a Florida summer as you read it, and the prose is dreamy and hypnotic. These girls are gross and they're cruel and they're mean and they're uncomfortable with themselves, and as women they're angry and disconnected. It speaks to the social and the family dynamics of girlhood, that shame and the jealousy. It's just a really good depiction of girlhood as being this kind of disgusting thing. The next book is Ripe by Sarah Rose Etter. This is about a woman who works in Silicon Valley in this very toxic work environment that kind of just totally takes over her life, and in a very on the nose magical realism metaphor for depression, she has a black hole that follows her around all the time. This is about her life kind of slowly unraveling through this series of bad luck, misfortune, mistakes, and other people's ill will, and she just completely breaks down through the book. It builds this really intense feeling of tension and dread through all these kind of small moments of her life, very casually and quietly getting worse and worse. Watching everything fall apart is more stressful than I can convey in words. Like, my heart was pounding when I was reading this book. It plays with format in a kind of fun way, and the blunt but also poetic style of writing really fits with the story that's being told. I thought it dealt with class in a way that was quite shallow. Like, it was just kind of like, homeless people exist, but I have a home? And like, that was it. There was no greater commentary on it than that. As I've sat with this book, I've realized that it has really stuck with me, and the more distance I get from it, the more I liked it. I think that dread and the almost claustrophobic feeling of her life just like absolutely going to shit is very unforgettable. The next book I've picked out is One's Company by Ashley Hutson. This is absolutely delicious. It's about probably the most fucked up woman of all of these books. She experiences an unfathomably traumatic event, and then she wins the lottery, and she uses that money to buy an isolated property up in the mountains where she builds an extraordinarily faithful replica of the set of her favorite television show. Once the set is finally completed after many years, she then embodies each of the characters on the show and plays through the entirety of the show as each of them. It's so over the top and fantastical and unbelievable, but when you're reading it, it all makes sense. She is at the same time manically insane and also collected and logical, which means that you start to understand the really weird choices that she makes from a place that doesn't really have any judgment. She's cold and disaffected and meticulous, and her worldview and the way she views her interactions with others is so strange that she almost borders on becoming a caricature. You hate her, you empathize with her, and you pity her all at the same time. At its core, this is about living in a world with other people and the fear of being perceived by them, or the fear of perceiving yourself being perceived by them. It's totally fucking unhinged, and I don't think enough people are talking about it. I absolutely loved it. Next up is Hurricane Girl by Marcy Dermansky. This is about a woman who escapes her life, I think on the West Coast, and she moves to North Carolina to a beach house, and after like a week and a half, her house is absolutely decimated in a hurricane and she loses everything. She then gets a gruesome head injury, and then she drives from North Carolina to New Jersey, where her mother lives, with like this horrific injury, profusely bleeding, and then it's there where she recovers from her injury and she ends up falling in love with her brain surgeon. The inner dialogue of the narrator is so interesting, with this really unique push-pull between logic and emotion. It starts with logic always prevailing over emotion, and as the book progresses and she loses more and more control over her life, emotion starts taking over and she starts being really driven by emotions and losing that logic that she had in the beginning. It's really cool to be inside the head of someone with a traumatic brain injury, and this book does it really well. She makes very strange choices, but they all are justified with the way her new brain is making sense of the world. Her thought processes are very simple and almost childlike, and it's very engrossing being inside of that, and it's also like captivating because you don't really know what she'll do next. It's so hard to predict what's going to happen. The dialogue is very stilted because no one uses contractions, so it can be kind of hard to connect to the characters, but it's all worth it for that incredibly satisfying ending. The next book I do own, this is The Driver's Seat by Muriel Spark. This book made me feel crazy. It's very trippy. It's this tiny little novella about a woman who goes on a trip and makes something happen to her. I don't want to give away too much because it's like 80 pages long, so basically anything I say is a spoiler. You learn very early on what is going to happen and how it will end. The question is why. And you kind of have to come to your own conclusions about that. Right from the jump, the main character is contradictory and rude in this really unsettling way. The dialogue is super off-putting because everyone is having their own conversations and just talking past each other. It's tense and it's fast-paced and it's very detail-focused without being overly descriptive, which is something that I don't like in books. This book deals with alienation and it makes you feel isolated when you're reading it, but more than anything, the main question is of control. You wonder if she is absolutely off the deep end or completely lucid, if she's powerless, or if she is in the driver's seat. My next pick is The Dangers of Smoking in Bed by Mariana Enriquez. This is a psychological horror short story collection with stories including a woman that's being haunted by a rotting ghost baby and another woman who has a fetish for people that are on the brink of death. The women in these stories deal with debilitating fear and paranoia, and it talks a lot about the lengths that their mental illness takes them to, like locking themselves away in their house for years or eating corpses. It's grotesque and blunt, and the horror is really rooted in the horror of being a woman in a violent patriarchal society. Almost always, the fear these women are experiencing is a reflection of violence being perpetrated against them, either at the interpersonal level or at a greater societal level, and it's also haunted by the ghost of Argentina's military dictatorship, which gives it a really unique lens of how women have been affected by that. I did like this short story collection a lot, but I did think it was kind of crazy how many transphobic slurs were used, and like it didn't start happening till midway through, and then it was like girl, we don't need to say that word. I feel like I don't see people talking about that when they talk about this book. I've seen a lot of praise for this book, and none of the praise has been like, wow, this was like really like wildly transphobic for like 2 chapters in the middle and then never again. I don't know. It just felt unnecessary, and I don't want to talk about the book without saying that because it really stood out to me. It just felt like totally out of place. You can't talk about weird women in literature without Sayaka Murata's name coming up. I have 2 books, her only 2 books. I think she has 2 books in a short story collection. So her 2 books are Earthlings and Convenience Store Woman. Earthlings is fucking disgusting and horrific, and I love it. I live literally right beside a fire hall. It follows a young girl who is convinced that she's an alien, and then as she grows up, she remains convinced that she's an alien, but she tries very hard to fit in with society by trying to pick up on the things that she's supposed to want and do. The ending of this is fucking bananas. It's absolutely outrageous. And like all of Sayaka Murata's work, this is really about the machine of society and the pressures and expectations that society puts on women. You need to get a good job, you need to get married, you need to have children, and you need to want these things. And Convenience Store Woman follows those same themes. It's about a woman who works in a convenience store, and she's worked there since she was in university. And she knows that this is something that is looked down on by society, but she loves her job and she doesn't understand why it's so undervalued. She is very much the other in every social situation that she's in, and she tries to hide that to keep her life running smoothly by kind of playing pretend. It's this perspective that explores the friction between a society that expects these certain things from women and a woman who cannot value the things that it wants her to value. What Murata does best is take these norms that you so easily and uncritically take for granted as normal and kind of over-exaggerate and obscure them and flip them on their heads so that you question everything that you thought you knew. And her short story collection, Life Ceremony, deals with those same things. I just read it. It does a really good job of like twisting things to make you look at them from a new perspective. Next up, we have Death in Her Hands by Otessa Moshfegh. This is the only moshfegh that I've ever read, and I don't think I'll ever read another one. I just didn't really love it. I don't really like her very much, but this book really does fit the bill of being about a woman who is complex and nuanced and also very obsessive and weird. Death in Her Hands is about an older woman who moves to a new town, and while she's taking her dog on a walk in the woods, she finds a note that says something along the lines of, "Her name was Magda, here is her dead body," and there's no body accompanying it. And she becomes absolutely obsessed with this note and with constructing a story of what might have happened to this girl and what she might have been like and what the people in her life also might have been like. She's so engrossed in writing the story of a crime that may not have even happened, and it starts to leak into her life as she meets more people in the town. They match up with these ideas that she's had about who could have killed this girl, who she could have known, what she could have been like. This book leaves you guessing at what is reality and how reliable the narrator is. You're almost entirely sucked up into her head, and her world is completely wrapped around this story that she's creating. And because you're so in her head the whole time, you start to feel very disoriented and like you're losing your grasp on what's real and whether or not she is somehow onto something or if she really is just rambling with no ground beneath her. What really brought this book down for me is that Otessa moshfegh hates fat people, and I know that makes me sound like a really uncritical reader who can't separate the opinions of the author from the opinions of the characters that she's writing, but I do really think she hates fat people. It really just seemed like that was her unsavory opinion leaking into her character because it was so boring. It said nothing about the character. It didn't give us any insights into her. It was just like this weird and like absolutely vicious hatred of fat people that was pervasive throughout. And I think it's important to note that moshfegh and her character don't just hate fat people, they hate fat women. This is the only moshfegh that I've ever read, but I've seen people say that all of her characters hate fat women in this very specific way that is like absolutely meaningless. It just left a bad taste in my mouth, and I think that if this is true that her other characters are like that, I'm not all that interested in reading more from her. These last three are maybe my favorite genre of weird women, and that's women who are obsessed with other women. The first one we have is The Woman in the Purple Skirt by Natsuko Imamura. This is about a woman, the woman in the yellow cardigan, who follows the woman in the purple skirt and stalks her every day. They're neighbors, and the woman in the yellow cardigan ends up manipulating this woman from afar, getting her a job at the same company as her, following her every day, keeping a log of her activities. The narrator is very deadpan and cold and doesn't stop ever to reflect on the absurdity of her actions. This is about a woman who is sickened by jealousy and driven by her need to be seen in a world where she just blends into the background. You really question what to trust about the narrator's perceptions because everything she says serves to fortify her fantasies and what she already believes. Like, she describes the woman in the purple skirt being essentially taunted by the neighborhood children, but the way she sees it as her being idolized by these children. It's all very mundane, but the stakes feel really high as you're reading it, and it culminates in this very devastating but also deserved ending that I really liked. Next up is Pizza Girl by kyoung Frazier. This is about a young woman who is just out of high school and she's very pregnant and working at a pizza place. And one day, a woman who's new to town calls into the pizza place and orders a pizza with pickles on it for her very fussy son. And the narrator becomes obsessed and infatuated with this woman because she is very vulnerable and very desperate. Her obsession makes her selfish, and she makes these choices that really hurt the people that love her most. And the beauty of the prose and the insight into the way her mind works makes you really, really connect with this character and understand where she's coming from, because she's really driven by grief and self-hatred, like a deep-seated self-hatred. She's intense and angry and complicated, and she's desperately trying to claw some control back into her life. It's really interesting how it deals with some unsavory emotions that we don't often see represented, like in the way that she feels absolutely suffocated by this undying, unconditional love of her boyfriend and her mother who just really want the best from her. It's thrilling and engaging, and it really shows you the lengths you can put up with of bad behavior from a protagonist while still really connecting to them and caring about them. And finally, you knew it was coming. It's Big Swiss by Beagin. I don't often like popular books because I'm just kind of better than you, and my taste just kind of really surpasses the current zeitgeist. I'm just so much more unique and mysterious. I don't really buy into the popular books. But this, I loved Big Swiss. Usually I find that books that are really popular, I expect that, I like always I make this mistake where I expect that they're really popular because they're really, really good and they're really, really well written. And Actually, they're popular because they're pretty good and pretty well written and incredibly accessible. And I always fall into this trap where I'm expecting the former and I'm disappointed by the latter. To me, Big Swiss was not that. It hit everything I wanted to, and it hit it well. I'm sure you know the gist of it. Big Swiss is about a woman who transcribes sex therapy sessions, and she ends up falling in love with one of her boss's clients. Our narrator is totally unreliable and makes her obsession out to be no big deal, and the lengths she goes to just be very casual, when in actuality she's incredibly fucked up and very manipulative, and you learn that through other means. Both women are very strange and messy and view the world with this totally unique lens that's different from both each other and the larger society. This book is very atmospheric and descriptive. It made me laugh out loud, it made me ache, it made me gasp. And it's also silly, like it's so silly. It doesn't take itself seriously. It does this phonetic spelling of a Boston accent that I just found so charming and fun. It's weird, it's funny, it's dark. What more could you ask for? I love books where women are free to be weird or gross or creepy or cruel or unlikable or off-putting, and I'm so excited to read more, but those are my 12 favorite. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.